Walking along a path at the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road towards the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and, well, setting accidental, almost forest fires. In the corner by the fire are 3 people. One of them is just grateful that it wasn't me. And yes, that's your co-host, Christina Brown, speaking. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Kids ought to be playing outside. Period. Research on this has existed for decades. As the 21st century progresses, and studies are furthered on human development, cellular biology, psychology, and neurobiology, the crucial need for children to be active in environments that calm overloaded sensory centers and, in turn, beneficially stimulate underused sensory and neurological centers of the brain is growing more evident to scientists and researchers. Some might even say the survival of the human species depends on it. Disney's WALL-E, anyone? A few years ago, Anthony Esolen wrote a book touching upon some of these matters and others in an attempt to wake us up to the need to allow children unsupervised and, quote, dangerous, close quote, play for moral, physical, social, and imaginative development. In his book, with a satirical title, 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child, he argues that, among other things, not allowing your children to explore and play, to be bored and creative, to be alone with nature and their thoughts or fellow playmates, is actually detrimental to their imagination and therefore to their development as humans. Without it, they can't have healthy relationships to the tangible world around them or able to make sense of their environment and the others who dwell in it alongside them. So, we thought we'd discuss this on the podcast today. Of course, my indomitable hosts Mandy Hauk and Matthew Mellema are here with me to toss these ideas around. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Indomitable. Wow.
I thought you'd like that.
I do like that.
So I really wanted to have this fun question to start us out. And I know I hinted at it only sort of in my intro, but I want to know what is the craziest, most unsupervised thing you did outdoors as a child? Or, it doesn't have to be outdoors. What is the craziest unsupervised thing you did as a child?
Was our generation ever unsupervised? We lived in the milk carton kids' stranger danger era.
Not me.
Okay, go for it, Mandy.
Gen X, here to represent. We had a creek behind our house when we lived outside of Atlanta. And I remember that my sister and I used to go down there and play in the creek, and there was a big metal culvert that we could walk through, like upright, and just play down there. And that doesn't really sound all that remarkable until I realized my memories of that. Looking from inside my little body out, I couldn't remember how old I was necessarily, but at some point in my young adulthood, I realized that we moved away from that house when I was 4. So my parents were like, that was just fine. I was down the hill in the creek, by the culvert and the whole. Wow. And that our house would flood. Like that area would flood when it rained. So pretty cool. So
yeah.
I know there were a lot of things. I mean, I know I liked matches. I don't remember setting anything on fire. But we were just pretty much unsupervised.
Okay.
Because I liked how their little heads were red. I looked at them as if they were like people. I personified them.
Oh, yes.
The matches.
The best. I love personifying.
So I didn't set them on fire. I would just play with them like dolls.
That's amazing.
I'm trying to figure out if that's better or worse.
I don't know. That's a whole other podcast.
I think it's fantastic. I'm on your side.
Yes. So I don't remember being, well, and then when we lived in Pennsylvania, we had a pond in our backyard, and I would go out there and like break the ice with my foot and like fool around. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
And my mom had a bell that she would ring, like a like a cowbell.
Yes,
When she wanted us to come home for dinner, she would ring the bell.
Oh, that's
So she didn't know where we were, what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
We just had to be close enough where we could hear the bell.
Yeah.
So
I love that. So I know, Matt, you called us the milk carton box or milk box carton kids or something.
Yes.
That's a great band, by the way. The Milk Carton Kids. It's a duo. Anyway, never mind. They're really good. Look them up.
I thought you were like
They're
saying...
bluegrass. No, they're really awesome. It's two guys.
Oh,
anyway,
nice.
sorry.
Speaking
I
of
digress.
bluegrass and country and ringing for bells.
Speaking of that.
Yes.
Were you ever rollicking in the grass? Frolicking in the blue grass? We're trying to segue.
No, yeah, I was... Matt's wearing a green sweater. It's close enough.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, to your point, there was a time, I would say this started in maybe the mid 80s, right, where for a variety of factors, I think national media is a big thing, where parents became conscious of, stranger danger, right? I'm sure throughout human history, there's always been rare instances where, some maniac, does whatever. So this was always a threat, but a very small one, a very rare one. It's exceedingly rare. But then in the 80s, all these very, very rare instances came to the front, right? So suddenly parents are like, oh man, if I let my kid play in the woods, they're going to be murdered by like an axe killer or something. So I would say for our generation, Christina, and even more so for kids younger than us, it was not done to just let your kids out and play. Even Mandy, you joke, but you're not that much older than us.
I know, but I am a different generation.
Exactly. From that distance, that was a sea change in parenting.
I think I'm pretty sure that it was John Walsh's son's disappearance, the guy who then did Unsolved Mysteries. There's a reason he did that, because his son's disappearance.
And again, that was like one of those 1 in a billion freak
1 in a billion.
Things. But it got on national news, so we all found out about it.
And it led to the foundation of the National Missing and Exploited Children, which is what the milk cartons were.
And again, to be clear...
Oh, that's what you're referencing, milk cartons. Oh, I understand.
Yeah,
now. Okay.
Because they figured everyone buys milk.
No, I get it now.
So they put the pictures.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, so it would say missing.
There's a common misnomer, I think, among a lot of older folks that the reason they do this because the world's more dangerous now. It's not.
No,
it's not.
No.
The crime rate, crime's actually gone down since then.
Yes.
So it would have been no more dangerous for our generation to go wander around the woods than it was for Mandy's generation, Mandy's parents' generation, or grandparents' generation.
Right.
But because it was in the public consciousness, it became a thing where if you're a good parent, you don't let your kid just run around outside.
Right.
Whereas, again, Mandy is just half a generation older than us.
Right.
Her mom would say, Mandy, go run out in the woods. I'll ring the bell.
Yep.
No way my mom would have done that. No way any of my mom's friends would have done that. That just wasn't a thing.
I just remembered we would go down to the drugstore almost every day.
Yeah, no friggin' way.
Which I honestly think was probably 3 or 4 miles from my house.
I don't know if you saw this on the news, but this made the news where a 10-year-old walked less than a mile to the store and his mom got arrested because of it now.
Well, now they have a name. That kind of parenting has a name. It's free-range parenting.
That used to just be parenting.
Yeah, exactly.
You were going to say something, Christina?
I hope that's where you were going with that, Christina. I didn't mean to derail you.
Oh, no, you didn't. It actually kind of breaks my heart. It's interesting because my mom was she's a very anxious person, and she has her own history of reasons why when she was growing up, but mostly inherited from her father. But so she had a lot of that fear, and she had a lot of the stranger danger, and we never see my siblings and I still joke about never seeing a 4-panel a van without thinking kidnapper,
right?
Just that really
if
scary.
They offer candy, don't take it.
Don't take
right.
it. Yeah. But on the flip side, I feel like I was really lucky to actually be one of those kids who did actually get to go out and play and not have to be within sight, ride a bike around the block with my friends' kids. We didn't have cell phones, so it's not like...
Right.
Did I say my friend's kid?
Oh, sorry.
Did I say that?
I derailed you with an irrelevant thing. Keep going.
It's okay. That's funny. Okay, wow. Yes.
Good point, because we didn't have cell phones or anything.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like if my mom needed like to know where I was, she might call like the neighbor like the next block down about like,
Right.
hey, is my daughter with your daughter?
Right.
But it was never like, I don't know. So I feel like, and she grew up in the country, which probably helps. And then her parents still lived in the country, so I got to go up there, and she was a country girl at heart. She loved raising animals, and so we got to go up to their place, which was of course had no stranger danger, and we'd mess around in like the old barn ruins. We'd pick blackberries. We even got to like excavate under their porch because they had a really old house and there was a whole bunch of like broken bottles and stuff that were like really old. So I feel like, oh yeah, and then we'd like go like flying kites down the hill. And anyway, I think I just got really lucky. And my mom was just very outdoor conscious, just very much just like, go play outside. No, you're not staying inside.
That's great.
Yeah.
That was not part of her anxiety. Like,
No. I mean, no, it was
fortunate.
not.
That's
No,
really good.
thankfully that was not a part. It was, I mean, it was all the like, stay away from any truck, any car,
Right.
and like, don't talk to people and, that sort of thing. But,
as long as you're in the woods, you're fine.
right. Or apparently down the street on your bike. Who knows?
Right. Just no vans.
No vans. But anyway, all that to say, I really actually really resonated with kind of this notion, and of course Esolen's idea here. So before we go any farther on this particular note, I do want us to say that this whole book is wonderful, and he is writing tongue-in-cheek. So any quotes that we read, we obviously want to make sure he is being tongue-in-cheek, and by telling us how to destroy children's imaginations, he's actually teaching people how to cultivate it. So, and another note, by imagination, the word imagination he's using, he's not just talking about daydreaming or imaginary games. He's talking about teaching children to envision the future and possibilities, learning to discern by observing, and understanding the pace of the natural world in order to order his own. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of set that up for our listeners. Since we're talking about safety, sorry, see, I just laugh when I read his quotes. It's too funny. One of them is about the quickest way to prevent children from developing their ingenuity is to keep them away from adults who know how to do things.
That's good.
I know. He says we can do this, he says we can do this the more readily by repeating to ourselves the truism that safety kills.
That's great.
Yeah. So anyway, do you think, Matthew, that your childhood would have been, I guess I could say, like, richer if you had been able to go out and be one of those boys in the woods who almost set fires to forests? To use an extreme example.
Would my childhood have been richer with arson? Yes. But I mean, I got to go out and do stuff. I still got to play. We had a big backyard. We had friends in the neighborhood. We could still do that. So this is not like any sort of throwing shade at my parents or, parents of her generation, right? But with that same token, I do think there is a lot to be said for just giving kids as much independence as they can handle, which is usually more than we give them credit for. Mm-hmm. And the broader mindset, which again, I think started in the 80s, still very much in bloom today, maybe more so than when I was a kid, is the idea that no amount of risk or danger is acceptable, right? Mm-hmm. Like the paramount thing is making sure there's absolutely no risk. If there's any risk, you're doing something wrong. Right. And that is actually a very dangerous thing, because if you teach your kid that all risk is bad, no danger is acceptable, then that teaches them to be an anxious person who can't rely on themselves and can't do things later in life. Mm-hmm. A very good book on this topic is The Coddling of the American Mind, which I highly recommend. Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, which basically sets up the thesis that they're looking especially at sort of this cohort that got hit especially bad. Sorry, kids. Between like the age of like, I think it was like 2010 and 2020, where it was paired. There were two things that came into play at once. One, they weren't allowed to do anything out of doors, right? The real world, their parents were hyper concerned about their safety. But on the virtual world, there really weren't guardrails. You could do whatever you wanted.
Oops.
And the point of the book is like, that's completely upside down, right? Kids need to be given more autonomy in the physical world. It's not as dangerous as we all think. Kids should be allowed to, play outside. But we need a lot more guardrails online.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That would be the thing that I think we need to keep in mind more as a society, all of us.
That's really interesting you say that. I was listening to a random episode of the Maven podcast. I'd never heard of it before, but I noticed they did one on this book for Esolen, so I picked it up, and one of the hosts had a hilarious quote. I think she's Generation X as well. And so she says, when we, parents of Gen Zers, were growing up, we were outside getting cuts and bruises in the real world, while the Gen Zers were battling online, and the only cuts and bruises they got were virtual.
Oh, that's funny.
I was just laughing. But it had so much wisdom to it, I think, in just that way. And even like, I know, Matthew, you mentioned 2010, 2020, but also even my generation, like there was just so much like of my peers who were only doing video games. And so my house was the cool house where the kids actually came to like play. And so the kids actually wanted to be there because
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And again, there's nothing wrong with video games in moderation. I want to cut a lot of our parents' generation slack, because it was in the culture, right? Like, it wasn't done that you let your kids do this because of, Matt Walsh or whatever. So it was just a very hard thing. I
Joe
think
Walsh.
Wait.
Yeah.
Well, whichever
or
one.
somebody.
Yeah, because again, if you let your kids, that's what was done. And, parenting is very conscious of what other parents are doing, right? So I think for today, for all of us, we need to consciously work against that now, just because it's so deeply ingrained in the atmosphere. Like, I will be honest, I know all the stats. I know that the odds of a child getting abducted by a stranger is minuscule. I know that. But still, when my kids are out front playing and I don't see one for a little bit, that's exactly where my mind goes, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So I still have trouble with this, just on a visceral level, because like most people, my brain automatically goes there, even though logically I know that that's extremely unlikely. So it's very tough, especially if you don't happen to live in like a beautiful pastoral scene where your house backs up to an elegant wood, right? And that's the vast majority of us.
Right.
Yeah, it's everyone's daydream.
Yeah, I mean, if you have that, great, but most of us don't. So you parents have to be more creative with that. You can't just be like, go run out in the woods. Like, my kids don't have woods. There's huge streets on either side of them before they get to woods. That's how most kids are.
Well, the scariest moment one of the scariest moments in my parenting was I lost Bethany in a Target, and it, like, just the first couple like minutes, I was like, oh, she's just around the aisle or whatever. But then as time went by, like, my mind totally went there.
Oh,
and
of course.
I just still remember like the prickles all over my body. I just got like prickly.
The prickles, yep,
and
I've had them too.
And I went to run to the front to like tell them to like block off the entry, and then here came
Walk
Bethany.
all the doors.
Yeah, and then Bethany came around. I think she was 7. And so she was freaked out too, because I had just sent her to go get one thing that I thought she could go get it and come back.
And she
got
find
turned around.
She couldn't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I remember.
Sorry, Bethany. I'm sure you're very capable now.
Oh, yes. She does not get lost now, but those Targets, man.
I know. Dangerous places in many ways for your budget and your
it's
children.
really easy to get lost because it's so bright and there's no shadows. There's no, like, how do you get oriented?
It's so unlike the state of nature, right, Christina?
That's right.
It is. Well done.
No, but for real, I think, Matthew, you're right. We're not shaming or blaming any kind of like things that our parents have to work with or other parents' generations.
Yeah.
I think there are trends, and I think they're worth being aware of, and I think that's what this book is, and that's kind of what we're having fun with. And
Yeah.
oh shoot, I just forgot what I was going to say.
You know.
Oh, I remember. I was going to go back to your point about video games, Matthew, which of course, it's funny. Like, I think Anthony Esolen is very much a Luddite, so I'm sure he would be perfectly happy if video games didn't exist. But there's a number of arguments for them. But I do think that the point about being in the virtual world is a little bit discouraging, because I think I also translate that to a lot of social media too. And that Pokemon game that people have now, that you like walk around in the streets and like your head's down and you're just watching your screen, and there's like huge groups of people like walking by, like with their faces
You're
closed.
like, oh, there must be a Pokemon around here
Yes,
somewhere.
there's this like virtual thing happening in the middle of like community, except it's not. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's very
dystopian to me.
it's
which
dystopian to
some
me.
people defend it because they're like, but people are outside, and I'm like, but
Sorry.
are they? I mean,
I'd argue no, but that may be
I mean,
extreme
maybe
of me.
there's ways around that. Like maybe if a parent said, hey, okay, we'll go look for a Pokemon, but then we're going to put our phones down and have a picnic. I don't know. Maybe it's a way to get the kids outside, but it's how you use it when you're outside. But
Oh, sure. It's interesting because the I had actually forgotten it was the thing, and then I was meeting with my physical therapist, and she said, yeah, I was outside, I was so confused. I saw several groups of people, their faces on their screens, just walking in this huge group, and I saw it the second time, and it's like, guys, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, we're in a Pokemon game, and she's like, oh. So it's like one of those things. But anyway, I think it's interesting because if children are always sort of beholden to the boundaries of virtual worlds, their interactions will actually be more determined by what the creators of those virtual worlds wanted that their viewers and their gamers to encounter. And it's like, because in the outside world, the rules of nature are different. And playing with your peers is different. And suddenly the boundaries are more of what you make them and what God has sort of generally created the outdoors to be for you as far as that.
That is fascinating to me that you just said that there are boundaries in the virtual world, because I think a lot of people would think, no, there's not, because it's like they tend to think because it's virtual, it's endless,
right?
But really the outcomes really are not infinite like they are outside, and that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, it is interesting. You think about it, like the virtual worlds are incredible, no doubt. And, computer science goes way beyond my, understanding, and it's really cool. But yeah, there is the sense in which a person created this world for like another person to enter, and there are boundaries, and there are things that a man-made something put in place for another man to encounter. So you are entering into this limited space with like purposeful takeaways, and you're not entering into Matt's like let me just finish my argument for nature. Here we go, the nature girl. I'm just gonna
finish your argument for nature.
For nature, I'm just gonna be the garden girl on this podcast.
And I'll be arguing against nature. Chop it down.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's not just like going outside has different, like, it has better boundaries, although I kind of think so in some ways. But your ability to connect with your peers outside, or sort of, I shouldn't say just outside, but sort of outside the screen, right? It more depends on your ability to relate to them, as opposed to like relate to them within this little virtual world and who their character is.
And the game's rules.
The game's rules. And I just think it's a little bit different. So, yeah, I mean, Esolen argues that like children learn to govern themselves in situations like this. They learn boundaries, they learn how to work in community, they learn how to organize a pickup game of baseball or kickball or flag football, and as a result, they grow up knowing how to handle complicated interpersonal relationships, workplace crises, and learn how to assert leadership or peacemaking or problem solving among their adult peers. And I think that's actually a pretty compelling argument. Not that video games can't teach any of this. I think my husband would be the first to say that, like, well, maybe not the first, but he would say that video games do have some things to teach kids and people about teamwork, and like he's used even like certain video games to like work out aggression and stuff. So, but again, I'm more on the Luddite side. If video games did not exist, would we be a better culture? Probably. All right, I've finished my green speech.
Yes.
Go ahead, Matthew.
She's handing it off.
So I will say some words on behalf of video games.
But we don't want to make this whole thing about video games, but just defend.
She just dumps all over video and is like, well, we're not going to do that. I'm going to do a drive-by shooting, but then let it go.
Okay, do I have to put on my referee little black and white
No,
stripe?
because I agree with a lot of your major points, Christina. What I would do to nuance your points is, first of all, I would like to point out a lot of the video game debate, there's a massive gender gap in interest in video games. And we just need to acknowledge it. There are some women who like video games. There's some men who don't. But on the whole, it's something that interests men a lot more than women. So I will admit, it gets my hackles up a little bit. It's like, I have wonderful memories of playing video games with my friends.
Yeah.
Like, we're all sitting shoulder to shoulder. We're talking about other stuff. We're playing the video game. And a lot of people will be like, well, that's stupid. Well, that's pointless. And
I am not one of those people, for the record.
No, yeah.
But keep going.
I will admit, that's what gets my hackles up a little bit, because it's like, okay, so something group of boys like to do together, that's stupid. You should do something, productive, like paint each other's nails or something. Right. So,
yeah, Matt.
So that's one thing. But also, to your point about like engaging in a world someone else makes, well, what's a novel? A world someone else makes. What's the game of chess? A game someone else makes. And in earlier centuries, there were literally people writing those same sort of things about chess. Like, that's not an exaggeration. And to that point, though, it's possible to read too many novels. So it's unhealthy. No. It's possible to play too much chess. Yeah, just giving yourself in the world that someone else creates instead of the outside, right? It's possible to play too much chess. It's possible to play too many cards. It's possible to do too much. It's absolutely possible to play an unhealthy amount of video games, and that's something worth acknowledging. But I do think, if done in moderation, some video games can be a very good way to build community, to socialize, especially with boys, because boys tend to not like just sitting in a circle talking to each other.
No.
We like to do something together.
You don't braid each other's hair?
But I also think you're talking about playing all in the same room. And I think Christina was talking about playing virtually, which still can be a way of building community. But I think that you would agree that that's different.
So there's differences there too. Like, I would be concerned if a boy is spending all his time playing video games alone in his room. Especially playing against strangers who could be grown-ups on the other side of the country,
now
right?
That is stranger danger.
So, and that's sort of the no guardrails online that, like, the coddling of the American mind's talking about. If you're playing online remotely, like, we're going to get a video game system for Christmas. One of the benefits is kids get to play against their Uncle Jeremy in New York. That's different too. So there's different levels. One, is it in moderation, or is it the only thing you're doing? Two, are you playing with people or by yourself? Three, are you playing against rando strangers on the internet? There's different levels to that. And we need to be careful not to conflate all that.
Well, let me just say, yes, absolutely. I think there also is, too much of anything is unhealthy. I think, yes, absolutely. But also, I think, Mandy, you're right. I was not trying to just hit on video games, because I think there's a lot of, I see a lot of social media the same way. Just that vortex of sucking you into a virtual world that's not real in a lot of ways, or misrepresentative, or in a lot of...
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, that's okay. I just want to say, I know too that there are a lot of great video games, and even video game soundtracks, that can be considered really good, like
they're
art.
Very artistic.
They are. And so I'm not knocking that at all. And I think there are some video game worlds that are quite impressive. And even me, Matthew, you might be shocked, but I was very much a Sega Genesis and PlayStation 2 car racing games with my siblings growing up. So I am not
Look at you. You contain multitudes.
But this podcast is about playing outside.
And also, just to sort of put a bow on that, again, the same book, Coddling the American Mind, the online thing that boys are more susceptible to is video games. The online thing that girls are more susceptible to is social media.
Yep.
So like cyberbullying and all that stuff. So so there's dangers
just
no matter
play
who you
outside,
are.
everyone.
So just play outside.
So if you just play outside more, you won't be able to, blow up aliens with randos in Florida, and you won't be
Setting forest
talking
fires.
crap about each other's lip gloss or whatever. I don't know.
There we go. Lesson learned. And we end the podcast here. Oh, totally kidding. So another thing that he talks about is not just, of course, the idea of like virtual reality, but he talks a lot about just kind of the idea of being locked in four walls and having like the concept of like low ceilings.
That's a good point. Just even the ceiling.
Yeah. He says, he talks about how like, I don't know that he says this directly, but we are what we encounter, right? In a lot of ways. And I think if we are constantly confined to a workplace or a desk or a schoolroom, or even just our gaming room, I think there's something about like if we are not able to be encountering the fullness of, well, I would say the outdoors in this context. I think there is something very detrimental about learning who we are and developing not just our imaginations, like as far as who we become as humans, but like our moral imaginations and what we understand about transcendence and who God is and what that means for us.
Well, it's funny because as you talk about that, I'm thinking about cathedrals, and they intentionally built them to get us to look up, and
absolutely.
to the rose windows and the stained glass.
Yes.
And the high ceilings to like, to let our imaginations and our mindsets be expansive rather than closed in.
No, I'm so glad you said that. It's funny because this was a quote that caught me being a nature lover and a cathedral lover.
Oh, okay.
But he was on this idea. He says, this is a quote. He says, "Now the odd thing about man is that he cannot help himself. But when he goes outside on a clear night, he must look up at the sky."
Yes.
It's so true. I thought about that.
It's very true.
I was like, I never can't look up outside.
Right.
When I go outside. Yeah. He says the dog does not do it. If the birds do it, it's not because they wonder at the beauty above them. They're only using those lights as roadside reflectors or signposts on their aerial highway. They do not wonder at them. But man, if he has nothing above him to gaze upon and wonder, ceases to be man. He not only can behold the heavens, he must. Regardless of what you, the reader, may think about the birth of the cosmos presented in the first chapter of Genesis, one thing is certain. It is a brilliant piece of psychological wisdom. The first thing our imaginations seek is the first thing God creates, the primal light.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that he said the dogs don't look up. They don't.
No, they don't.
I never thought of that.
Neither did I until he said
They don't look up.
I know.
Winston,
You're missing out on so much. Ugh, poor ignorant Winston. But something you brought up earlier, Christine, which I thought was a good point before I gave my little video game rant.
Sure.
But a good point you had was when kids are playing with each other, they learn to make their own rules, to settle their own disagreements. I think that's a very important point. One that applies, whether you happen to be outdoors or indoors.
Right.
And I will say it's another thing where our culture has gotten this idea in so many parents' minds. So many well-meaning parents think that their job is to be the 100% of the time enrichment activities coordinator for their children, right? So you need to be planning bespoke things for your children all the time.
Right.
If there's any sort of disagreement, you need to deal with it all the time using the magic words so you don't turn them into a psychopath, because apparently if you apologize the wrong way, it turns your kid into a psycho. So something I am trying intentionally to do, and I need to intentionally do it because as a parent in this generation, it doesn't come naturally. When my kids are at the park and they're playing with other kids, leave them alone. Sit on your bench, let them do their thing. If they start to bicker about something, don't rush in and take care of it.
Yeah.
Let them sort through it.
Right.
It's so hard.
And if your kids just in the backyard by themselves, let them figure out something,
Right.
If they say you're bored, be like, figure out something to do.
Yeah.
I'm reading my book. I'm fine. You figure out something on your own. I'm not your activities coordinator.
I'm guessing both of your parents had the line that was like, "Oh, you're bored. Good, I can find you something
exactly.
to do."
Yeah. Oh,
I've used it on my kids.
Yeah.
my mom would.
You want to empty the dishwasher?
Yeah, exactly. It would be chores. But along the lines like you were saying, if your kid is doing something on their own, leave them alone. I want to point out, like, for my family, this was just the way my parents were raised and the way they raised us. Going outside always meant, like, rough, not necessarily rough, but competitive play. Like, if you're going outside, you are supposed to be running around, playing tag, doing something physical. And I am not that kind of person. And so I never wanted to go outside because it was part and parcel with, now I have to go play tag and I'm slow and I'm going to lose and then I'm going to cry and, you know, and I don't enjoy it. I don't like running around. Okay. And so I think it would have been so cool if I'd been allowed to take the book that I was reading in my room.
Oh, man,
Why couldn't I go read
so
that?
edgy.
I know. Go read that outside or something, you know? And I remember that, like, because I got we had a trampoline. We used to live out in Black Forest, and we had a trampoline, as you do. That's, hello.
Oh,
we are
the
good
best.
Coloradans.
Yes.
And so I would tell the girls to go jump on the trampoline. So here I am repeating the same thing that my parents did. I'm like, outside means jumping around, running around. Like, it didn't occur to me that I could take a coloring book outside and color. You know what I mean? There are different ways to engage.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so I remember I would look out, and there was this one day in particular, I looked out and Bethany was on the trampoline, just on her belly, and she had like picked some flowers or something. And she was doing something with the flowers on the trampoline. And I almost opened the window and like told her to like jump. And then I was like, wait a minute. What? Why?
Right.
You know, and then here was Emmy. And then I'm like, where's Emmy? And Emmy was over under the tree, like doing something else, probably had a book or something. It was just this really cool moment where I realized, wait a minute, they don't have to be training for the Olympics out there.
And to the other point you made earlier there, Mandy, is it's okay if there's an element of some danger and risk too. Yeah. Like again, like my growing up, I had a big backyard. We were friends with my neighbors. We had so we could go like back and forth, jumping fences. I have really great memories going over to a friend's house, and a bunch of us guys would get together, play football in the park, and play capture the flag like in the bluffs over there. There's an element of danger. Some of us could have gotten hurt. That's what made it fun.
Hey, our neighbors had two very mean llamas.
There you go.
Emmy thought they were really cute and went over. She went over toward them one time, and one of them like hissed at her. Don't talk to Emmy about llamas. She has scars.
Llama drama.
One of my favorite things at playgrounds. You know that thing? It's like there's like the seats arranged in a circle, and then you like spin them, and they're all holding on to it. What's it called? Like a
it's called a merry-go-round.
There you go, merry-go-round.
Oh, I have nightmares.
I love the merry-go-round so much because there's an element of danger. Kids could get a little hurt.
They could get flung off.
Not dangerously hurt. Yes, you see? You see, that's the safetyism talking, Mandy. Yeah. This is a good thing.
Well,
they could get flung off at high velocity in a fun way. So you need to hold on tight. There's an element of risk. You could get a little hurt, but that teaches you a lesson. You're probably not going to get seriously hurt, and it's fun.
Well,
now Mandy's going to tell us why actually safety's fun.
No, it is. I had a certain same gender person who grew up in the same house with me, my sister, who, the merry-go-rounds, she would get them, it was totally like the Lucy and Charlie Brown thing. And I trusted her every time. She's like, no, this time I'm just going to do it slow. I'm not going to do it faster than you want. And then she would just go, and then not let me off.
Aw, poor
and
Mandy.
so I have trauma. But in general, they're fun. And she's sorry now, and it's all good. We're fine.
have great memories of those at the apple orchard. They had some pretty epic ones when we were growing up. So
The little merry-go-round.
yeah, the little merry-go-rounds.
things,
And
yeah.
yes, Matthew, we fell off with many a skinned knee into the gravel of the orchard. So it's
Yep.
good
There,
memories.
I remember there were incidents of vomiting sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but I wanted to, go back to that idea of the cathedrals, Mandy. Not to like harp on the architecture in general. I love cathedral architecture. That's not my point. My point is that he had a really Esolen, that is. He had a really interesting line, and I have to read it last because I have to read this little part before it.
Context.
But it's like it's a cool line. But it's back to the whole idea of like the four walls or the ceiling, the low ceilings, right? So he's talking about, again, looking up. He says, man is the creature that looks up. Man praises. And then he says, again, talking tongue-in-cheek, we can suppose then that to remove from the child the possibility of praise, to rob him of any intimation of the being that lends existence itself to all things that exist, would be like confining his mind to a room with a low ceiling. This is all there is, we say, and don't ask us where it is going or what it means, because it is only going to destruction, and it means nothing. Now, build a cathedral in honor of that. Write an epic poem about universal heat death. Compose a song of love for what cannot love. Just try. When your head gets too sore from all the bumping against the ceiling, you'll learn better and be a good and useful citizen.
That is awesome.
I know. And then his line that I love is, can we imagine human life under that spiritual lid?
Lid.
Lid!
That is the perfect, yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think just the idea of like, if you're not teaching your child to look up, to go out and...
Or giving them the opportunity to look up.
Thank you. Yes, that.
Just putting them in the situation.
Putting them in a place. Yes.
Where they can look up.
Yeah. And that goes for, I think, I'm saying this even as a parent, like even reading this makes me laugh, but it's also, I remember I was reading some of this today. I was like, when I pick up my kids from home or from school today, I'm sending them outside because they haven't been outside in several days. And you know what? They need to be outside.
Well, and you know what? I need to send myself outside, frankly.
Right? I know. I mean, that's what this is so good to like remember is, we do live so much of our lives, particularly in the 21st century, in these boxed, kind of, there's no dome. I wish there was domes. I'd like a house with a dome. Monticello.
There you go.
Yes.
I love
Thomas
Monticello.
Jefferson loved domes. He made one in his house on purpose. But there's this funny quote too from the book of the 1923 Book of Knowledge. It's this. I don't even know who wrote it. It says, but Anthony quotes it in his book. He says, one of the disadvantages of our civilization is that too often stress of circumstances place square pegs in round holes in the artificial economy of our lives. A man of splendid frame, who should be exploring the wilds, must sit at a desk. A brain teeming with fine imagination is deadened by routine work in a factory. And then my favorite line, nature never practices such misfit politics.
That's great.
I know. As the garden girl, I'll say amen to that.
Yes, definitely.
So I have a question for you, Christina.
Absolutely.
This is something I know Esolen addresses at some point, but I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, that all sounds great. I agree with you all in principle, in theory, but I live in a city. I live in a suburb. There's no nature that my kids could get to without crossing 5 or 6 extremely busy streets.
Sure.
What the heck am I supposed to do practically? Like, I could drive my kids to a trail, but if my kids are wandering around on a trail by themselves, someone would call the cops on me.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's
or
our
if
society.
both parents work and they can't. They
Yeah. Or like,
absolutely.
adults have created a built environment in our cities that can only be accessed by cars. So now we're saying, kids, get out more. I can't go anywhere without driving now.
Right.
You looked around?
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely.
What would you say to those people like, I agree with you, but what do I do practically?
Yes. Okay, that's funny. I'm like practically jumping out of my seat. I'm like, I have ideas. First of all, yes, do try to get kids outdoors as much as possible when you have a chance. Because first of all, there's just no substitute. And life sometimes does not allow us as much opportunities to be outdoors as we would like. But trying to get them as much as often is really good and really healthy for, as you were saying, Mandy, for all of us. Like, it's not just gonna, even when I take my kids on hikes, it's not just good for them. Like, I feel so much better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like this big, it's a gift to yourself and to your kids if you were to take your day off and take them to a local park or whatever. So I would definitely argue that if you don't have like immediate access. But I also say like a lot of this is not, like, there are ways to access nature indoors. Like for my daughter's birthday, actually, she got this like caterpillar butterfly growing kit. Ooh. And yeah, by National Geographic. And so it's just this like little kit you can order, like caterpillars, and they send you all the things you need to grow them and feed them. And it teaches kids about nature, and they can watch them and observe them and feed them. And then if it's, you know, you can let them go into the wild if you want, you can learn about them. My parents also had us raise frogs from tadpoles, and so we got to learn about those and observe them, make terrariums, catch lightning bugs to feed them, you know, and this is when we lived in the suburbs. There's like other things you can do. I mean, Charlotte Mason is a great person for this. Also look up a lot of Montessori learning resources. There's a lot of like hands-on play, nature, and you can do things like leaf rubbings and like all kinds of crafts even that involve.
Oh, I love
like,
leaf rubbings.
Oh my gosh.
I forgot about
yes,
those.
Yeah. You could, there's so many things. Like get your child, like I know Matt, you were talking about that you had like an encyclopedia of like dinosaurs when you were a kid.
I did.
Yeah, like get your kid encyclopedias of natures, you know, nature books like stars, outer space, like just find things from the natural world and just like have them in your home, you know?
Right.
And then like grow seeds with your kids, you know, start seeds indoor, give them their own little like potted plants and let them play in the dirt and get messy. And so I would say there's actually, I think there's a lot of ways to kind of pull that indoors.
And water play is always really fun.
Water play.
I have a friend who
very sensory.
She had 5 daughters, and she still does. But anyway, and now she has, I think she's up to 12 grandchildren. So, but anyway, when her girls were cranky or whatever, she always said either go outside or play with water. Those two things.
Nice.
Or both.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like put them in the bathtub, maybe not for a bath, you know, whatever.
Oh yeah, I knew parents who did that too.
Yeah, just let them play with water.
Yes.
Or send them outside or both.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And I also want to push here too, like outdoors is amazing when you get the fresh air and the movement. Like there's no substitute for that. But also don't limit your imagination as a parent or caregiver to like my child's not physically outdoors, you know, because like even small things like cooking, right? You're engaging with produce from nature, things that were grown in the ground, you know?
That's a good point.
Yeah. You can even grow tomatoes on your own porch if you live in a balcony in New York City or something, you know? Use those, like have your kids grow those and teach them how to make pasta with like homemade tomato sauce, you know? Use the basil that you keep by the kitchen sink that they're growing. So I think I don't know if that answers your question, Matt, but I think all of that kind of takes kids into an environment where they're touching and feeling and being independent with things that are living, breathing, moving that God created us in, and allowing them to tangibly, experience them and play with them in their own right. So I would also add, and actually I wanted to include this because I didn't know this, but apparently a lot of people knew Auden, but Thomas Edison, you know, we all know Thomas Edison, famous inventor. He
was a jerk to Nikola Tesla. And we in Colorado Springs are all Team Tesla because he had one of his secret laboratories here.
That is another podcast.
Yes, but he was a brilliant man. As someone said, we can't cut off all of the heroes because they did one wrong thing.
Hashtag Team Tesla.
That's like, okay. Hashtag.
Anyway, this story is a good one. Go, Christina.
Okay. So Thomas Edison was doing poorly in school, not intellectually, not with his studies, but he was just having a lot of behavioral problems because he was bored. Yeah. He wanted more hands-on. He had things. So his mom was actually pretty epic. And so what she did was she took him out of the official learning environment that he was in, and she dedicated a whole room in her house to him that was just called the tinkering room. So she gave him what she called tinkering time, and she put a whole bunch of stuff in there and let him play unsupervised for hours with whatever he wanted. And she said, it doesn't matter, like there are no rules, just go have fun and tinker. I don't, do your own thing. And so anyway, that was something, Matthew, I think that we were talking about is like, if we're too much of overlords or overscheduling our kids or not letting them be, have time to themselves to explore and, like you said, have, do arson. No, I was kidding.
Some light arson.
Light arson.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's things like that, like give your kids opportunities to work, like say, hey, it's Lego time. Like you can't come out of your room until you build something. Like have fun. Put on an audiobook, put on like their favorite Disney songs. I don't know. But
Right.
I think that the nice thing about that too is it's it can be make being a parent less stressful and more manageable because there's so many signals from like the broader culture. Again, like if Edison's mom was in today's world, it'd be like, well, you need to enlist him in like robot camp and math camp and all these team sports, and you need to create your own special like electricity workshop that you teach him yourself. Instead, it's like, here's a room with some junk. Figure out some way to have fun.
Yeah,
that's a lot easier because that way, parent, you can do something else.
Yeah.
You're not responsible for your child having a good time and doing something enriching at all times.
Right.
Well,
Sometimes the best thing you can do is just let them do their own thing.
Oh, yeah.
It honors the individuality of each child in the Imago Dei. Like each child is so different.
And they need to learn who they are too.
Exactly.
They need to be able to understand what makes them tick or what things frustrate them or, and some of my best memories, I was thinking about it in preparation of this podcast, some of my best memories really are of the unstructured play. Like the kinds of things that we would create because my mom was like, no, just go play. The end. It was pretty great. I have some, great memories. And the one I wanted to bring up that I thought you guys would laugh at, just as an anecdote, was my sister and I would play with plastic ponies. And they were just plastic ponies, but we created entire worlds. We had weddings and, with ponies. They married each other. They had like wedding dances and James Galway should be forever honored because several of his flute soundtracks were wedding songs.
Oh, that's
for the ponies.
funny. I love that. That is so funny. My girls and their friends had these Beanie Baby epic things they would have. It was like they had clans and
Oh my.
no, seriously. It was so funny. And they would set them up all around the room.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yep. When I see a pile of stuffed animals in my house, I'm like, oh, some kind of stuffed animal battle's happening.
Yes. Yep.
So, yeah. But I think honestly, that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about with like you guys was what does it look like to let our children experience unstructured time, specifically in the outdoors, of course, that's the best. But basically, how can you let a kid be a kid? Because well, and how does that make them better humans? Experiencing the transcendent. I think that's my answer with I'm with Tony on this one.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I really think that. So honestly, guys, I think in summary, so much of what Esolen is saying in this book is really summed up in his last chapter. How we must, and again, tongue-in-cheek, strive at all costs to keep our children from contemplating the transcendent. And if our children are never outdoors in the very place God built for them, then they will never have the opportunity to encounter him fully. The place that God designed for his people to live and to dwell and to learn of who he is crucial. I think it's simple. If we don't encounter the art, how can we encounter the artist? So.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that note, I highly recommend everyone that you go buy the book, 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child by Anthony Esolen, friend of the Anselm Society. And enjoy. It's a funny read. He makes me giggle. So anyway, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers. The customers are trundling home, and you have polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.